Alrighty. Hello, hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? Is anyone out there? Defender, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? You feel like you're driving in France now? All right, good. You guys can hear me. That is great. Hope you guys are doing well. I was contemplating whether or not I was going to drink on stream today because I was like, last time, like my voice got really like dry and all that. So I do have my water, but I am enjoying a beer. It's just a Modelo. I don't know. I don't really have a favorite beer. I drink a bunch of stuff. So if you have something and want to partake, join me. Let's see what you guys got in the chat here real quick before we get started. Bourbon Thursday. Not today. I normally drink bourbon, but I'm kind of taking it easy today. I have to like do things at some point tonight. So, cool. I don't know what some of these things mean, so you guys will have to tell me. But anyway, actually, let me check if this is working. Okay, it is. Bourbon Thursday. Not today. Not for me anyway, but hopefully for you guys. So I'm reading through some of y'all's comments here. Google only, let me read this. Okay. So from what I've heard, Google only monetizes a tiny fraction of searches. Do you think LMs could increase the fraction of monetizable searches, even though we're still in growth in search? So we're going to get to this actually, because I actually prepared a presentation, like a little slide deck to help me with my thoughts on Google as we talk about this. And the monetization of searches is something that I wanted to talk about. I actually think it may be the opposite of this, but let's kind of get into it. So actually, let me try to get into that now. So the topic of today's live stream is Google, irrational stock market or dying monopoly. And yes, it's a little bit, I don't want to say clickbait. It's not clickbait. We're going to talk about it, but it's a little bit kind of, provocative in terms of a title. And this is because if you guys have been online anywhere, basically, this is all people are talking about it. A lot of people are talking about it, right? And you have the people who are like, hey, Google's dying. And you have the people that are like, oh, if you think Google's dying, then you don't know how to read a chart or whatever, right? So I want to talk about it today. Now, this slide deck, I literally just threw it together and you can see how basic it is. It's just to jog my memory as to what I was thinking. But what I'll try to do is I'll be looking at the chat too. So if you guys have comments, questions on particular things as I'm going over, just put them in there and I'll stop kind of as I go. So I don't know if you guys, I don't know how your portfolios look today. Mine looked pretty much dead. It got crushed, especially Snowflake. Snowflake got like demolished today. It was pretty bad. But let's talk about Google. So right now it's at about 172 and you can see here by this slide. Are you guys able to see this? Yeah, it looks like you can. It was up a little over 200 and basically has come down from there, but everything's come down. So it's not specific to just Google, but one thing that we will talk about is, look, it's trading at a projected price to cash flow of like 13, which is pretty cheap. The other stock that was trading about that level was that I bought recently was Taiwan Semi. I just thought that was ridiculously cheap for them. I think it's cheap for Google too, but let's actually talk about some of the issues. So, is Google dead? The quick answer is, well, no. I mean, obviously, Google's not dead. They just had a quarter where their revenues were up like double digits, right? So they're obviously not dead. And I don't think when people say that Google's dead, I don't think they mean that they aren't making money, because they clearly are. I think what people mean is that is it dying, right? And what I would say is, if you look at the assets that they have in total, that they have some of the strongest assets out there. Now, I specifically highlighted YouTube, Cloud, and Waymo. But obviously their biggest moneymaker is search. Hold on. Sorry. I lost my placer. But what about search? So the reason why people are worried about Google is because when you look at search, it's over half of their total revenue, right? And I don't have the numbers. Actually, you know what? I think I can get them. 1 second. If we look at, yay, it worked. If we look at their latest earnings release, if you look at search, right, you can obviously see it's more than half of their total revenues. But if you look at YouTube, it's about 10 billion. You look at cloud, it's about 12 billion. And, Waymo is like not profitable or just barely profitable now. So when you add up cloud and YouTube and Waymo, they don't even equal half of the revenues that come in from search, right? So that is the reason why people are talking about it as if there's a problem. Now, is Google search dead? No, I mean, come on. It's crazy to even think that. I think they even had some numbers out there where the amount of, I think the actual number has continued to go up in terms of the number of times people are searching. But the question that people are asking is AI search, LLMs, ChatGPT, is that going to disrupt Google search? And yeah, so this is my slide where it literally just listening. I mean, clearly I was doing this very quickly. But the question here is with AI search, which is ChatGPT, it's Grok if you use X, which, I mean, Grok 3 is amazing, right? Like if you've used that, it is like pretty freaking awesome. Claude, Perplexity, Meta, and of course, Gemini, which is Google. So, and actually, if you've never, let me go here. If you've never actually used any of these, I would highly recommend that you at least try it. But like, here's like Perplexity, right? And it's less of a, when like people talk about ChatGPT, a lot of times will use it in different ways, right? And this is part of what I think they talked about in Joseph Carlson's video, how he had his little Venn diagram about how he doesn't believe how people use LLMs is how they use just a normal search, which I agree to that to a point. But when you have stuff like Perplexity, right, it's kind of meant to do the same type of stuff, but with more like enriched information and just stuff. So like, for instance, if I'm like, when was the last time the Bears won the Super Bowl? Because I like pain. Now it's going to give me, actually, this is a pretty crappy example because it didn't actually give me anything. Let me do that again. Oh, whoops. Let me, what is AI mode for Google? All right, so as you can see, right, what it does is it gives you kind of links for the places that it got information, but then it also provides this like rich context of all this type of stuff where you can hover over stuff to say, oh, it came from this article, and all the stuff that we talk about with like Notebook LM and other LLMs or chatbots. It kind of does it, but it's kind of a nice way to learn stuff as it relates to search, right? And so the question is this type of search actually going to disrupt what or how we all use Google? I mean, it's a complicated question to answer, right? Now, I don't know if you guys watch the BG2 podcast, but it's pretty good. If you like stuff about, and pretty much anything tech, then they talk about all that. Now, there's one particular part here that I wanted to talk about as it relates to SEO and Google search, obviously. Let me see if I can get this to work. I think I can play it straight from here, so we're going to try it.
I witnessed almost daily
hold on. I got to get
people that some of the other players a bit.
Yeah,
who do you think is closest from a user standpoint? Is it probably, you'd have to count the Gemini searches in the Google search, right?
Yeah.
To get to a number that's close to OpenAI.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, let's just start with Google, okay? So there's been a lot of reports out over the course of the last couple of weeks. We have public companies now reporting their Google organic clicks are down 20 to 40% year to date. So the question is why? Like, why is Google's clicks down so much? Because if I do a Google search today on my phone, half of the page is taken up with an AI answer
No doubt.
to whatever my Google query is, and the rest are all paid links.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the right decision for them to make, right? If you want to compete, you ultimately have to be willing to, take the innovator's dilemma head on and really just cannibalize your product with AI. Now, if they do
and
that—
if you're one of these humans that thinks SEO wasn't dead already, which I would have declared it dead a while ago.
Yes.
It's really fucking dead.
SEO is dead. And just, those are the free links.
I understand.
That was the core product that used to attract everybody to Google.
Yeah.
And the idea that SEO is basically now gone is pretty.
I think, and this is just in a.
Okay, so now you have to understand something. I'm actually going to change this. Oh, hold on. See, look, I'm out of practice here. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, there we go. So the one thing that you have to realize when we watch these type of things, right, is these guys are obviously VCs. Like, they have, huge companies that invest a lot of money in this stuff. And you have to understand kind of, one, I know Altimeter, I don't know about Brad Gurley, but I know Altimeter is invested in OpenAI, right? So part of it is they're talking their book, right, in OpenAI. And I think one of the charts they showed earlier in this video kind of made no sense to me in terms of how they compared OpenAI and Google. But regardless, right, part of it is they're obviously talking their book, but then another part of it is they're, extremely early adopters, right? So their perspective on this is going to be a little bit skewed compared to just the average user out there, right? Like, if I ask my mom, not even my mom, I just ask my friends about any of these AI tools, almost none of them use them or even know what they are, right? So it's good to get some perspective on that. Now, what I will say is what they talked about here on this slide was really interesting to me. Now, but before I start that, historically, what I've talked about with Google is that I don't think that Gemini is as good as the other models in my experience. And I've been using them for at least a couple years now, right? Gemini to me is just not as good as the other models. And I question if that's going to be a long-term issue for them or not. However, what Google does have is distribution, right? Everybody uses Google. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody uses Chrome. That is so powerful that even if they just put a decent amount of AI features into the normal Google search, which they've already done, and we'll talk about AI mode here in a minute, then they're going to get a lot of people just by default, right? Because people are already using it and they don't want to change and they don't know the difference between one model and another model. And as long as it seems like it's good enough, that's going to be fine for the vast majority of people as it relates to, how they integrate that into search. That's my opinion. However, when I look at this to me is probably the scariest chart that I've seen related to being concerned over what's going on with Google search. And now what this kind of is, it took me a while to understand what any of this was. But basically, and I don't know where this data came from, so I'll just caveat it with that. But this is the one that he showed in the podcast. So this is the click-through rate trends of paid and organic links on Google search. And the difference is AIO is AI overview. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have used Google search lately, but when you use, well, hold up, maybe I can just do it and show you what I mean. Sorry, 1 second. We're doing this on the fly. So if you type in anything into Google right now, like I just typed in, what is perplexity? So these AI overviews are now all over Google search. And it's basically, it comes from Gemini and it's trying to give you that kind of AI LLM experience at the top of Google search, and then you go down to all your links below that, right? So this part up here is the AI overview. Now, what this chart is saying is that when the AI overview is not shown compared to when it is shown, the click-through rates are vastly different for paid and organic links, right? So if you just go here and you say in January of last year, basically a year ago, it was 2.68 and now it's 3.97. So that's good. It's improved. I'm like trying to understand the data as we go here. That's improved, but that's when the AI overview is not shown, meaning that when the links are up higher on the screen, they're more likely to get clicked. I mean, that makes logical sense, right? But when you look at when the AI overview is shown, then it's like it's less than half of what it was a year ago. And that's for organic links. And if you look for paid links, it's the same thing. When the AI overview is not shown, it's actually worse because it was 23% a year ago, which is actually pretty good. And now it's, a little under 18. Whereas when the AI overview is shown, it's down a couple percentage points, but it was basically 8. And now it's like mid 6. So the reason why I think that's important is because a couple things can happen here, right? You have, even if everyone's still using Google, if Google is not as profitable when it comes to search because the links aren't really working as well, then that can be a problem in itself, right? And so when he was saying that he believes it's the right decision for them to put those AI overviews over there, he's saying it because, look, it's going to cannibalize your business, but it's what you have to do to stay relevant, to survive, right? So that's kind of what I thought when I saw this. Is, to me, we can talk about like operating income and all those stuff with the financials. This is probably the most worrisome chart that I've seen in terms of, is Google search going to continue to be a good moneymaker for them in the future, right? So I'll pause there and I'll look for some chat questions. Hold on. Let's see what y'all are talking about in the chat. Hold on. My beer's in the way. We have logistics problems here. So Carlos, at some point, Google needs to integrate Gemini into search. That would be their chance for losing market share in the LLM war. So what I would say is, yes, I agree with you, but they've already started, right? So the AI overviews and what I showed you guys earlier is that, oh, wrong one, sorry, is them already doing that, right? And they've had this for a long time. I mean, it showed up in the Google app like months ago. I want to say almost a year ago, maybe, or I don't know if it was that long, but it's been there for a while. So Defender, oh wait, it's not working here. Oh, there it goes. Been buying Google for a year. Like to hear your thoughts. Well, we are talking about it. Perplexity and Grok. So I agree, right? I've shown you guys kind of the tools that I use. I use a lot of AI tools probably every single day. I use a bunch of different ones. I actually pay for a couple. I'm a huge believer that they can really just really help you level up your own skills and knowledge about anything you want to learn, whether it's related to stocks or, anything, which is pretty cool. So that's my opinion. Okay, let me see if I can get this to go. Can Google become OpenAI? Can Google become OpenAI faster than OpenAI can become Google? I don't know how to answer that question. And honestly, I don't know that that's what Google needs to do, right? Because again, even if OpenAI has the best model, I actually don't think they do right now. I think Grok is just unbelievable. I think for writing code, Claude is unbelievable. So I do think ChatGPT is good though. But anyway, with Google, I think it's really going to be about, okay, what does the future look like for them in terms of all their different monetization avenues, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Okay, last one. Do I think that Google is a buy? Well, stay tuned and find out, because we're going to talk about it at the end. All right. So if we go back here, let's see what's next. Yeah. So the other thing I did after I saw that chart, because I was a little worried, I was like, man, I didn't know that the click through rates had gone down that much. So I looked at their last quarterly earnings transcript from like a few weeks back. And what I noticed was that I was looking for anything around like ad performance and all the stuff. And the ironic thing is, this is from Notebook LM, which is by Google, obviously. But the interesting part was that all of the highlights about ad performance didn't really have hardly anything to do with traditional Google search, right? It was all about like YouTube, they like AI powered marketing, like, being able to target specific people with AI, which is what Meta's doing a lot of and is working really well. So all of this stuff here is good stuff. But what I saw was that it's not really related to normal search, right? So it kind of lends itself to the whole question of, okay, is this really the trend? And is there stuff we have to worry about as it relates to Google search, right? Now, just today, so it's great timing, they released AI mode, which when we look at it, and actually I'll go to the website here, which is basically, let's see if they have their little video here. Now, if you look at it, it's going to look very close to what we saw with like Perplexity, right? It's the same kind of idea where they're using Gemini to kind of create these more rich kind of multiple, like what's the word I'm trying to say? Like they bring in data from multiple places, they aggregate it all together, and they make it look like almost a nice little like research report based on the question that you asked, right? So it's very much like Perplexity. I saw some people on X that were like, oh, Perplexity's dead because of AI mode for Google. And again, what Google has is mass distribution, and they have the benefit of people not wanting to change their process, right? Inertia, where a person's always opened up Google and searched. They don't even know what a Perplexity is. And so they're just going to use Google and be like, oh, what's this new stuff? And ironically, what they'll probably do is like, oh, gross, I don't want all this. I just want my regular search back, right? Like this is how humans kind of work. They're very slow to change. And that works in Google's favor, right? So as they're creating this stuff, I think what they're showing is they're trying to showcase that, look, we can do all the stuff that all these other things are doing if you want it, or you can just use us the way you've always used us, and the choice is yours, right? So that's definitely an advantage for them. All right, but what are the actual risks? And I just want to let y'all know, I haven't made a slide deck like this probably like since I was back in my corporate job. So I was like, what am I even doing? This is crazy. All right, so the risks, right? What happens if everything gets fragmented? And this is kind of what they talked about on that BG2 pod. If most people use Google or YouTube, which is also Google today, and that's where they do their searching, what happens if a percentage of those people move off? So instead of, 90%, it's whatever, 80% or, even lower. And I know people have talked about whether it's really 90% of all search or whatever. And I get it. There's a lot of ways we can look at that. But you obviously have AI, LLMs, all that type of stuff. Also Meta, right? So I watched the Joseph Carlson video, and I know he talked about local is a really big spot for Google, and he's absolutely correct. It is, obviously, with maps and just, businesses actually use that as a discovery platform, right? I always believed that the real threat to Google in terms of search is Meta and not actually LLMs, because, my thought with Meta there is Meta has every business, right? Every business has an account on their platform, on at least one of their platforms, and usually multiple, right? And if they could actually get a search that actually worked, because their search is terrible, right? But if they could get a search that actually worked, then you could actually initiate that whole kind of local commerce thing within a social app where people are spending most of their day anyway. That to me would be super powerful. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just not important to them or they haven't been able to do it well. But that to me is the real threat to Google, especially from a local perspective, not AI and LLMs. But as of right now, it's not a credible threat. So anyway, but that's why I put Meta there. Now, reduced ad effectiveness. Oh, you can't see what I'm looking at. Reduced ad effectiveness is what I just talked about. So like, let's say that they use AI overviews and people start using Google search more than ever, but now those ads and those click-through rates are lower and just not as, valuable anymore. So advertisers aren't going to pay as much for them. Then that could hurt their profitability, even though they would quote win, right? So I think that's a risk for sure. And then the DOJ lawsuit is something that we've talked about before. Now, I don't usually worry about this type of stuff because I'm like, you know what? I don't worry about any of these type of things until I know something, right? There's actually something to worry about. Now, in this case, they talked about breaking up Google. I don't personally think that that's a good thing for shareholders, even though I know other people disagree, just because I do think they get a ton of value from having everything together and the data, just like the data connections across all of their stuff. However, iPhone default to me is an interesting thing, right? Because, they have that lawsuit where basically it's ruled that the judge, claimed that they have a monopoly, and we're waiting on a ruling to see what they're going to make them do as it relates to being the iPhone default or not, right? The way that I think that this can really hurt Google is if for some reason, if they come out with a ruling or the judge says, look, you can't be the iPhone default for a number of years, however many years that is. To me, that would be a hit to Google because, again, people don't like to change stuff, right? Whatever's the default is what they're going to use. And if it means that they use anything else other than Google, then it could just introduce them to something different, something that now they get used to even more. And it just could kind of nudge that disruption kind of along those lines right now. How likely is that? I have no idea, but that's something that I'm going to be watching. I think the last I heard is that in April, they're going to be talking about what the ruling's going to be on the DOJ lawsuit. So we're just going to see what happens. And then lastly, leadership and employee culture. And this is one, obviously, that is very subjective. But it's one of the things that I think I talk about in my slide around why I trimmed Google back in October. With Google, they kind of have this history, right, of weird employee culture things, whether it's like walkouts and protests or the people that were, in the CEO's office, protesting one of the projects that they're working on, or whether it's the Gemini rollout where the video wasn't a real video, or when it was the Gemini rollout where the image generation wouldn't create white people as the Pope, or all these weird things, right? And the reason why I thought that was a big deal for them is because with where we're at with AI, it's going to get insanely competitive, right? It's already competitive out there, and they're in a ton of businesses that have some really tough competition already. But my view is that it's going to take people who are really willing to make tough decisions in order to win in this space going forward. That's my view, right? Now, that being said, I think the comments that you hear coming from Google, from Sundar himself, have been very good. It's clear that they understand that that's what's going on, because he said words like, hey, we need to be more scrappy. We need to prepare for a tough year. And those are all the right things. But I do think that that's a risk. Oh, whoops. Sorry. I don't know what I'm doing here. Now, what I've seen online about this, right, is when people talk about Google, it's gonna, everybody's wrong about Google, or it's, if you're a Google bear, then you're wrong because you don't know how to read a chart, or if you're a Google bull, it's because you're delusional and you don't know what's coming in the future, right? I don't think that's the right way to look at any stock. I don't think there's right and wrong when it comes to stocks, right? It's about probabilities. And I talk about this a lot. anything can be a win or anything can be a loss. And it's all about your entries, your exits, what you believe about the company, how long you hold, and all those things matter, right? And there's things that are outside of your control. You can do the best research that ever existed. You can do the most research more than anybody else, and you could still be wrong because there's things that are outside of your control. So anything that we do in stocks is about probabilities. And the way that I look at these things is not, is Google going to be okay in the future? Or do I think that they're a good buy or not? Oh, I do think about it in that frame of mind, but it's more like, what is the probability that they're going to be, as strong as they are today in 5 years, right? Like I think about it like that because there's no way for me to know. And so if we go back, actually, when I was watching Joseph Carlson's video, he had a part where he kind of talked about that towards the end, and I wanted to play it. 1 second. Clearly, I'm having technical difficulties.
Today on the Joseph Carlson show, they build upon it. They make it so that there's a whole new category of searches that didn't exist prior to now. Overall, I believe that Google's in a position that even though LLMs are incredible, they're impressive, they will take some market share here from some searches. I think overall, investors may be surprised that Google search continues to grow, that the revenue of it continues to grow. It might have some ebbs and flows like Meta does with advertising dollars, but overall, the organic growth of wanting to organize the web's information is still going to be valuable. And the use cases from Google search and LLMs are still different. LLMs are great, they're powerful, but they are different. So I think when looking at Google stock today, the risk has increased for this company. I do think it's slightly less predictable than it was a couple years ago. My sentiment has changed slightly more to the negative when looking at Grok, but I also believe the company, still with all of that factored in, is undervalued. The stock is already priced for this poor sentiment. It's trading as though it's already dying, while it's still growing faster than the majority of companies in the market. And this is the type of scenario that these companies get into frequently.
All right. So I thought what he said there was really interesting, right? He said himself, right? I think the risk is higher. I'm looking at Grok, so my view of Google is slightly more negative than it was before, right? And so I think that this idea that, it's either right or wrong, or, either you hate Google or you love it and it's the best thing ever. I think it's more about risk and probabilities, right? What's the sentiment? What's the risk? How strongly do you feel about it? And I think the more that we look at stocks that way, the easier it gets, or at least the easier I feel like it gets for me, because I'm not so worried every time of, am I right or wrong about this? Because I could be right or wrong about anything. I mean, we just looked at the the video that I published yesterday where I'm grading my own analysis. You could look at my waste management analysis and be like, hey, I researched some stuff. It looked like I knew what I was talking about, and I was totally freaking wrong about it, right? So at the end of the day, there's too much like of a concentration on, did you get this right or wrong, as opposed to adjust your portfolio as it relates to probabilities and risk. And when I say risk, it can mean a bunch of different things, a bunch of different people, but it's risk that you are comfortable with, because nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but you want to adjust your portfolio in a way that makes sense with what you believe may happen. And the example of that for me, and sorry, I'll get to comments here in a minute, guys. Sorry, I know I've been rambling. But the example of that to me is why I trimmed Google back in October, right? And my thought process back then was, AI to me was at the beginning of its trend. Even though a lot of people said with NVIDIA and all that it was like at the end, it's going to wind down. I just disagreed. I think it's at the very beginning, and I still think that. I know that, competition is going to be insane, which we just talked about. I thought that their employee culture was a disadvantage, right? When you have a person like Zuck at Meta who's willing to kind of do whatever, and he has complete control over decisions of that company, there's people who would look at that as a negative. I actually think it's a positive, because he's shown a willingness to make a tough decision and not worry about what other people or the market happens to think about it. And at least up to this point, they've worked out pretty well. Now, how do I know this? Like, how do I know that Google's employee culture is a disadvantage, or that it's not as good as the others? Well, I don't know it, right? It's all based on just information that I see or stories that I read, and I'm kind of making these assumptions, right? So it's one of those things where I compare it to like being a manager. So I managed people in my corporate career, and when you hire someone, you never really know what you're getting until you get it, right? Like you can look at their resume, you can interview them, you can do all that type of stuff, and you get some information, but it doesn't give you kind of like what a person's all about. It doesn't tell you, you know, what motivates them and all that type of stuff. Or like if we use sports as an example, if, you know, every player could be measured by just how fast they could run or how much they could bench press, then it would be easy to draft, right? But you don't know what a person kind of has inside them, how hard they're going to work, like all those type of things. And I think stocks in some way are kind of the same, right? You can look at any chart you want, and you can look at all the fundamentals and you can look at all the numbers, but it's not going to tell you the stuff about a company that can make it successful that can't be quantified on a chart somewhere. So, you know, whether that's our job or responsibility as investors to figure that out, I don't know. Me personally, I find it interesting, and so that's why I do it. So, you know, at the end of the day, what I'm doing or what I did with Google was I was uncomfortable with where they were at compared to their peers, right? I felt way more strongly about Meta. I felt way more strongly about Amazon. And so what I did was I took, you know, a measured probability risk to say, I'm going to trim Google. It's still part of my portfolio because I think they can be a winner, but I don't believe in it as much as these other two. And so I'm going to put more of my portfolio into them instead. And so that's kind of the way that I've approached it. However, I think that's what my, I think that's what my last slide actually says. Yeah. However, I think most companies in this space, regardless of if they're the winner or not the winner, I think they're probably going to do better compared to the majority of the companies in the market, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it is Google. At the end of the day, they still have YouTube. They still have Waymo. They still have cloud. Like, they have a lot of good things going for them, and that's not just going to stop. Obviously, we already mentioned it, but people are slow to change, especially non-technical folks. And I think as it relates to search, people are going to be even slower to change because they're so used to doing it a certain way for so long. They have a huge advantage in terms of distribution and inertia, which we talked about before. People are already using it. It's not like people are going to stop using Chrome. I know, you know, Perplexity, OpenAI, they're all creating browsers. All that's fine. But again, only your real early adopter type people are going to be doing that, at least at first. And so, you know, I don't know that that's a huge thing for them. And then they actually do seem to understand the challenge, right? Like they've talked about, we got to get more scrappy. We got to dig in a little bit more. So I think they understand kind of what the problem is. And then obviously, I actually still hold some Google in my portfolio. So clearly I'm not totally down on them. I didn't sell out of it completely. But again, my point here is there are risks. And I think it would be wrong to just ignore them and act like, oh, you know, it's fine because they're, you know, have a decade long, you know, trajectory of growth. I mean, that doesn't matter anymore, right? So it's just one of those things where understanding what it is, why you believe what you believe, and then adjust your allocation to them or any other company accordingly. So, yeah. So I think that's it in terms of my thoughts on Google. Now, sorry I rambled for so long. Let me look at the chat. So Tyler, fun fact, Google traded at approximately $90 in February 2023 when ChatGPT hit the mainstream news cycle. The stock has roughly doubled since. I mean, yes, all that's true. I don't know that those are really correlated, though. I mean, number one, even ChatGPT now is, you know, mostly for earlier-ish adopters. So I don't know that we really know what the impact is of that yet. Plus, a lot of things were going on in the market in 2022 to 2023 or 24. So pretty much everything went up and, you know, doubled, unless you're like Walgreens or something, or you know, maybe AMD. I'm sorry for you AMD holders out there. So I don't know there's much about that I would take. Um, let's see. Sorry, I'm a little lost in the chat, so you guys are just going to have to bear with me here. So I use Google search, but I would not pay extra for AI. And what I would say is, I understand that view. I would also say that it maybe depends. Like where I think AI is super helpful is when you actually want to do something, like, not necessarily what you would use a Google search for, but you want to learn how to code, you want to learn how to speak a different language, you want to do something from a business perspective. It can be extremely, extremely valuable for those type of things. Okay. This is a great question. Raphael, do you think Google search will be the main source of income moving forward? So the short answer is, I don't know, of course, always caveat it with that. How I would answer this is, if it is, then I think that Google's in trouble. So that's kind of how I would answer that. I think that they have a lot of very positive things. Obviously, YouTube is amazing. We don't know what Waymo is going to be in terms of profitability yet over the long term. And then cloud, right? But if things like cloud and YouTube become a bigger part of the pie, I think that's a positive thing for Google. My question for Google search in terms of being the main income source is, I think the trends that we saw on that chart in terms of click-through rates and all that would have to change, or some kind of new innovative way to monetize AI related results would need to be created or kind of, win out. That's my thought on that. All right. So here's the other question from Tyler. Do you think LLMs could increase the fraction of monetizable I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. Fraction of monetizable searches, even if they slow incremental growth in search? I actually think the opposite of that is happening. I think they are increasing the growth in search, at least according to Google. They said that people are using it more than ever because of the AI overviews. But I think that the profitability of each individual one is going down, right? So I think the opposite of what you're saying is what's going to happen, that people may actually use it more because they can use it for more things. But at least based on that chart that we saw, if the click-through rates continue to go down, advertisers, in my opinion, will likely pay less if there's a better option. And in this case, the better option could be Meta. I don't know. So we'll just have to see. I think people are not considering the integration with Android. Having to install an additional app to have to access AI is huge. Right. So, sorry, I didn't let y'all know what I was reading. So, yeah, again, I think this is exactly what we talked about before. It's distribution, right? So they already have it with Google. And this is actually why being the default on the iPhone is so valuable, right? Because the iPhone users in general are a valuable demographic, and most people won't change the default. I would argue most people probably don't even know how to change the default browser on their phone. And so, yes, it is absolutely an advantage for them. So Yeti Wise, who is also a channel member, which I appreciate, thank you, said that they're trying to integrate ads into the AI overview as well, though. My question would be, have you ever clicked on one of those, or how often have you ever clicked on one of those? That's the question. So Jeremy S., is Google a buy? I think I don't know if I was clear about it or not. Yeah, so I agree with what people have said in terms of, are there risks? Yes, there's risks, but it's priced right now at like a 13 projected price to cash flow. I think regardless of what happens with all this, they're probably going to be more of a winner than most of the companies in the market. Now, are they going to be a bigger winner than Meta or Amazon or OpenAI or whatever? I don't know. But I think that they have way too many high quality assets, and they're trading at, a price valuation that is pretty low for a company of that quality. So yeah, I would say that it's a buy. I had it on my list, I think in my portfolio overview, I had it on my list of attractive stocks in my portfolio right now. It's just that list is growing with every day as things go down 10%. But yeah, I would call it a buy myself. Is this a live stream or a pre-recorded stream? It is a live stream. I just created a little slide deck to have something to talk about specific to Google. So tell me if you like it or not. Yeah, so I don't know about the appeal process in terms of the case. I'm guessing it's going to take years as well. Again, it's more of just like, I'm watching out for April because I think that's the next time we're going to hear something. But we'll just have to see what happens. So Lupin says, not sure I agree with the iPhone defaulting, as Google is literally the top search on Bing. Yeah, I think the question here is, what are they going to actually implement, right? Are they going to implement Bing? Are they going to implement a new thing? I have no idea, right? So it's, more of a question mark of, if they implement a new thing and it's not Google, then the majority of people are not going to, change it. They'll probably just use whatever's there because they may not even notice that it's not Google. So I don't know. We'll see. Gemini is fine now, in my opinion. Now, I will say that Gemini is much improved from where it was a year ago, but I use Grok. I use ChatGPT, whatever the new one is. Now I can't remember what it is. And then Claude. Gemini to me is by far the worst. Like, it's not even really close. It's definitely improved from where it was, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not as good. Again, for the things that I'm doing, right? Which I'm probably more of a power user that is doing a bunch of stuff. So for everyday use, I'm sure it's fine. So Melting Rubber asking the important questions. How long is this market drop going to last? I don't know. So originally, my opinion on it was that it was probably going to be more short-term than long-term. But I will say that, especially in my portfolio, I mean, stocks are dropping like crazy. Like, I'll show you on my portfolio real quick here. My portfolio for today is, McDonald's holding strong, my lone green for the day. But like Snowflake is down 12% today, just absolutely crushed today. So yeah, Cloudflare crushed. So, me taking profits on Cloudflare at 155 are, looking better and better every day. But, in terms of how long, who knows? What I find happens in these cases is stocks go down very, very fast when they do, and then they slowly go up over time, and we'll see. I don't know. I think a lot of it probably has to do with tariffs, but what I've found over time is that I'm going to say this. I know people are going to probably roast me in the comments, but it's amazing how much price movement happens to follow the charts. And I know a lot of people don't believe in technical signals, but it's kind of crazy to where usually the narrative ends up trailing whatever the charts say, right? So you had a lot of stocks that were hot from a technical perspective and a fundamental perspective. And I think that when you have things like tariffs, or you have whatever kind of disruptions in the geopolitical, landscape, I think they end up being good excuses to just bring everything back down. So, whether that's a lasting thing or not, I don't know. I did say that at the beginning of the year or end of last year that I thought big tech would still be very good for 2025. Now, right now, the market is testing that prediction, but I think once we get into earnings, right, at the end of the day, I think those companies are still going to have strong earnings, and I think other companies maybe not so much. So we'll just see what happens. All right. Yeah, so I thought LLMs were going to eat Google. I use them, more, but I saw Joseph Carlson's video. I realized it's true that most of what I'm using for is not the ones that they take profit off of. And that's a really good point, right? That's why I brought up that chart. Every search isn't as profitable, right, as another. So if you're just looking for something and you just want information on something, then that's probably not the most profitable one. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to my slides. But when it's actually related to trying to find something, or like local or commerce, that to me is where it really matters. And that's where they make their bread and butter, right? And they even talked about that in that video. So that's why, to me, this is the most worrisome chart for Google, because if this trend continues down to like a meaningful level, then that could be a problem for them. So I agree with you that I don't know that there's a ton of overlap in terms of how people use LLMs and Google search, but there's going to be more overlap over time because they're continuing to integrate that stuff into Google, right? So when they said that they expect those things to go up, or that they're experiencing more volume in search, that's basically what they're saying, is that people are starting to use Google search for more of those LLM type of things. And what I'm saying is, on the surface, it may sound like that's good, but if you can't monetize that, or if it brings down your overall ability to earn with search, then you could still kind of have it be a negative for Google, even if they technically win, right? Which I know it sounds counterintuitive. So do you think owning TSMC would be a nice hedge against Google search's decline because of LLMs? It seems like a world where LLMs replace search is a world where we need a lot more compute. How I would answer this is, I don't know that I would specifically call it a hedge against Google. What I would say is, regardless of who wins in search, the world's going to need a whole bunch more compute. And there's a reason why I've added TSMC into my portfolio, continued adding into that position, which I added more in March already. It's the only place to go, right? And I think the announcement earlier this week, or whenever that was, actually proves that, right? So $100 billion investment into the US. How exactly that money is going to be spent and where it comes from, I don't know. But I think the reason why, you had meetings with Jensen and Trump, and then with Trump and Taiwan Semi, is because of what I said a couple weeks ago. If America wants to keep their lead in AI, it's going to have to be with NVIDIA and Taiwan Semi, because there's no other way. So yeah, I would say that owning Taiwan Semi is good regardless, because we're going to need more compute regardless of what happens with search. That's my opinion on that. All right. Sorry, the chat like updates every once in a while, and then I get lost. Okay. I just realized that all these are Tyler. Tyler, you are like totally spamming the comments with questions, but I appreciate it. Thanks. If GCP and YouTube were spun off, what earnings multiple would you be interested in them? I don't know. I would have to dig into that more. I will say this. If YouTube were spun off, I would be very interested in it. I'm a huge believer in YouTube, clearly, right? I'm on YouTube. But I think YouTube's an amazing business. I think it only continues to get better. I think they've done a great job of actually incentivizing creators, which is one of the reasons why it's so big. So yeah, if YouTube got spun off, obviously I hold some Google shares, but I would definitely keep the YouTube shares if it ever spun off. Cloud, it's tough. Like, I already hold Amazon. I think AWS is amazing. I think holding any cloud provider is probably going to be just fine because they're all going to grow. So that's part of the reasons why I like to attach myself to companies in secular trends, because you don't have to know who wins. You just know that the whole place, the whole industry is going to grow. All right. Yeah, so this is what I talked about before, Riley. So I agree with you. The stats show that they are actually increasing the number of searches, and it's because people are using it for more things, right? So the question will be how monetizable is that, and what does it do to their bottom line? I think that's the main question. All right. Ariza, people were talking about NVIDIA after the crypto crash in 2022. It's an easy buy and it'll dominate. Again, I think at these prices, it doesn't hurt to buy Google. I think it'll be just fine. The question will be, what's going to happen with Google search from a profitability standpoint, and what does that mean to their overall business in terms of the percentage of their revenues that it is, basically. Hitman, best dip to buy? I don't know. There's a bunch of them, and I bought a few of them earlier in the week, and obviously it just continues to dip, so I'll still be looking. But there's a bunch of stuff that looks attractive. I don't know about their lower costs. Like, I would need some actual details on what that means, because like those numbers can be a little misleading in terms of the cost per token. If you're talking about their actual API and their API pricing and all that, again, it depends, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the reason why they can do that is because they make a ton of money. And so they can, basically provide those things away for cheap because they make money in other ways, and they can use it as a loss leader to try to gain, more popularity, more use out there in the market. But it probably doesn't stay that way forever if it does. So that's what I'm saying. I don't really know that makes a big difference. Okay. Melting Rubber. Oh man, NVIDIA might be a buy now or soon. I have NVIDIA as one of my most attractive looking stocks in my portfolio right now. I mean, they've already guided for what they think the demand's going to be. I mean, they're like sold out for 2025 for Blackwell, right? Or whatever the time frame is. So I think NVIDIA is going to continue to surprise people. I don't think people realize how much of a lead they have, how important they still are going to be. And I think NVIDIA looks cheap, actually. Let's see. So, I mean, again, revenue can grow and click-through rate can be lower, right? Like those two things aren't necessarily always correlated. Now, you could have just pricing goes up and there's not a better alternative. I know Meta has seen really good performance with their AI tools, with their ad platform. And so their price per ad has gone up a lot. So again, and what we don't know here is the actual, let me see if I can get it back. Like what we don't know here is the breakdown of the amount in each bucket, right? Because that's going to also depend. Because like in one case, organic not shown is actually higher, right? So you can have more like there. So it's hard to tell exactly. But at the end of the day, if this is true, then it is a concern. All right. Let me look through the chat here. Where can we see your trades for the... Oh, no, wait. Where can we see your trades for the day? So I'm not really sure if this is what you're asking. I don't trade every day, but whenever I do actually have a buy or sell, which obviously it's at least once a month, but then when we have like big downturns, I get a little bit more active sometimes. I have actually YouTube channel memberships, which I don't really talk about much, but anytime that I have buys or sells, I always update those, like, right after I do it, basically with a post. And so people who are channel members, like, they get those when they need it. For most people, they don't, want that or, need that. And so they just wait for my portfolio recaps. But yeah, if you're interested in channel memberships, go check it out. Melting Rubber, is that a pic of Peter Lynch and Warren Buffett in the background? Yes, it is. So this is Peter Lynch. Oh, look at that. I can do it. This is harder than it looks to do this. So that's Peter Lynch. And nope. Okay. I was just bragging about how I could do it. Now I can't do it. That is Warren Buffett. So yeah, I talked about that maybe 2 years ago, but I basically ordered some, like, the actual artwork I ordered off of Etsy. And then I just went to, like, my local Walmart and got them on, like, a canvas print, hung them up, and that's what that is. Renato, I increased my NVIDIA position in this dip. Good for you. I'm pretty sure it's going to work out well. All right. David Robinson or Tim Duncan or someone else. Who is your favorite Spur? Now, these are the important questions that we need to talk about. So I will say this. My wife is a huge Tim Duncan fan. She loves Tim Duncan. Now, me, I've actually gone through, obviously, I'm just a sports fan, right? And I'm a Spurs fan. When I was a kid growing up, I actually loved David Robinson. Like, he was like, it's crazy how many people don't realize how versatile David Robinson was. But the funny part was, like, if I had to pick one of the big three, it's probably Manu, just because he was like the, like, emotional leader. Like, he was amazing. But I was a huge Kawhi Leonard fan when he was here. Like, he was like, I remember when he was a rookie, and I was telling my wife, like, he's going to be good. I don't think people realize how good he's going to be. And then he actually ended up being, like, amazing. And then all the drama happened, and we all were like, boo Kawhi and all that stuff. But I will say now, my favorite Spur is absolutely Victor Wembanyama. We love Victor here, and we hope he gets better. And Stephon Castle's really popular here as well. Like, my kids love Stephon Castle too. So I'd say Vic and, Steph Castle are our new favorites. That's what I'll say. All right. So George asked, what do I think about Avgo's earnings? So Broadcom, I actually didn't look into them yet. I actually didn't get a chance to look into them. Broadcom is one of those companies that I think very highly of, though. Like, I actually think that Broadcom is the next most interesting, like, chip designer than NVIDIA, right? Like, a lot of people go to AMD. I actually think Broadcom's way more interesting than them. It's just one of those things where I already have a lot in NVIDIA. I already have a lot in TSM. And so I haven't looked at them recently, but I know they've come down a bit. So I was going to take a look. But if you have an opinion on what you thought of their earnings, let me know. So what you're saying is, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand the comment. So I guess what you're saying is that because most people aren't bullish on Google over LLMs, which aren't new, it tells you to buy more Google. What I would say is, even though LLMs aren't new, the implementation of them or the use of them is still not even at a mainstream level, right? ChatGPT was released, October 2022. And even then, you would have had to be like an extreme early adopter. I think I tried it out in like January 23 or something like that. I think I created an account then, something like that. But I like to experiment. Like, I'm a tech guy. I'm an early adopter, right? So I don't think that my perspective is normal in that way. So again, I wouldn't put too much stock in the fact that LLMs aren't new because they're still unknown to most people, right? So I don't think we know that yet. I think time's going to tell. I bought Amazon and Microsoft. I feel good. I bought some Amazon as well, and I feel good about it. How about Iceman? Iceman Gervin was a little before my time. Obviously, respect what he did, but I never really watched him play. So, yeah. Jeremy says, great live stream. Keep it up. I appreciate it. I felt like I rambled for the first 20, 30 minutes, which I think I did. But, yeah. All right. So, Tyler, do you have any thoughts about the potential Intel breakup and how it might affect TSMC? Well, so I will start with this. I don't know Intel as well as other people know them, right? I haven't actually dug into them. But my opinion on Intel in general is that I don't really understand what investors in Intel are hoping for, right? I have not seen anything that makes me think, wow, this might be a good place to put my money, right? Now, I know people will say 18A because I saw that NVIDIA, I think NVIDIA and Broadcom both were testing out 18A, like their 18A design. I don't know how much to read into that. I don't know if that's we're testing it because we were asked to, because they're a domestic provider and we just want to know if it's even close, right? Or if it's actually, hey, this is close and it may be an alternative to TSM. I don't really know, but I just feel like part of the reason why I haven't dug into Intel is because I'm like, I don't know why I would waste my time with it. Like, what am I hoping for, them to do, right? Whereas like when I look at NVIDIA, I look at TSMC, I mean, these are obvious winners that, yeah, if Intel gets their stuff together or they split off and, the, chip design business is interesting or the manufacturing business is interesting, then I'll look at it at that time. But I just feel like turnarounds are just too risky, at least in my opinion, if it's not like a company that I know personally. But yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts on it. Yeah, so Nikki is talking about like CapEx. I know a lot of people talk about the CapEx. I don't feel the same way about CapEx spend that maybe other people do. I mean, clearly, look at my portfolio. It's all the big spenders, right? At the end of the day, if you believe that AI is truly a shift in how we do compute and how we interact with technology, then spending on it is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, if the market's going to do that because of CapEx, then it just means it's an opportunity, right? If you think that over time they're going to be a winner, which I think that's really the main question. I don't think it's even about CapEx. I think it's just, do you think they're going to be a winner or not? Because, what they spend in CapEx in a year isn't all that important if you believe in them long term, right? So that's my thought on that. Renato asked if I got inspired by the Trump announcement with TSMC. I didn't actually watch the announcement. I was like busy at the time that it happened, so I was just reading about it online. So I'll have to go back and watch it. I was excited about the announcement itself, though, because again, a couple weeks ago, I said the only way that we can keep our lead in America anyway for AI is with NVIDIA and TSM. Like there is no other way. So it was nice to kind of, have the announcements or the meetings kind of validate that view a little bit. And so we'll see what happens. I think the only question here is that announcements are one thing and, a lot of money is thrown out in terms of headlines, but, what does it actually mean and when? I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, so a deep dive on SPGI. Yeah, it's one that I get asked about a lot, right? Especially when I added MSCI. A lot of people ask me why I added them and not S&P Global. I think S&P Global is an amazing company. Like, let's just be clear on that. And actually, what's funny is I got out of MSCI kind of more recently just because I didn't feel like it was trending in the right direction, especially because they're kind of one of their claims to fame is their leadership in ESG data. And obviously, a lot of people use them for that. I question how well that data is as a predictor of anything really in terms of investment returns. And, my concern with them was that over time, that if the market started to feel the same way and those retention rates on that data started to go down, then it would really tank them, right? Now, I mean, that hasn't happened yet. That was just, again, that's, me trying to project into the future. But had I actually added S&P Global instead, then I probably wouldn't have cut them because I don't think they have that same risk. And the reason why I added MSCI at the time and not S&P Global is because I think that at the time they had a little bit better, like the growth projections were a little bit better for them than S&P Global, and I thought there was an opportunity there. So, it's funny thinking about it now. I actually hadn't thought about it until you asked this question. That the reason why I cut MSCI wouldn't have existed for S&P Global, so I probably would have still had it. Yep. James Miller. Hi, Matt, subscriber from the UK here. Just want to say I love your channel and love the original content you post and the honesty and transparency you show. Keep stacking them wins. James, I appreciate it. Thank you for being here. I'm excited that you're here on the stream. I remember your comments from like years ago when you were watching my videos. Joey, do you think TSM is overvalued? If not, I still think it will tank with NVIDIA because the stock price literally follows it. So I think those are two different questions, right? So do I think that Taiwan Semi is overvalued? No. Oh, look, my dog's leaving. He's had enough. He's like, I've had enough of the stream. Let's actually look at it. Sorry, you guys have had to look at my mug here for the whole time. Let's look at Taiwan Semi. So Taiwan Semi, look at this. Look at this nonsense. Ugh, just brutal. Taiwan Semi is trading at a projected price to cash flow of 13. 13. I mean, this is the only place that you can get the most advanced AI chips that everyone is trying to build and deploy. I mean, it's not even just NVIDIA, right? Like if you took NVIDIA out of the mix, even though NVIDIA has, most of their like supply, locked up. If NVIDIA went away, they would still be sold out of supply because of everyone else would just, basically pick up the slack. So I think that them trading at 13 is just insane. That's why I added more to my position. It's becoming a larger position now because of that. Now, the issue is they have a ton of geopolitical risk. And if you're going to be into, buying TSM, you have to be comfortable with that because like there's a risk, there's a thing that happens, whether it's, negotiations between, multiple countries, the tariffs, the, actual risk of invasion or something like that. All those things will totally tank them and probably NVIDIA and other things too. But again, part of my opinion here is that if America says that they want to keep their lead in AI, then making sure that we're good with TSM is absolutely critical, right? If we're not, it impacts companies like NVIDIA, Apple, all of them. So now in terms of the stock price tanking and all that, look, if tech comes down, if tariffs continue to be a hot topic, then all these companies are going to come down, right? So that's not specific to TSM. It's not even specific to NVIDIA. I don't think people really understand how undervalued NVIDIA and TSM are, at least in my opinion, based on the fact that they already have insane demand. Like they're sold out. I mean, like they have no more supply to give anybody because of all the customer, or, all the demand they have. So, yeah. I think I kind of answered this already. What do I think about NVIDIA? Can they pump back up? Well, I think this is two questions. I think the crash can continue, but I do think that long term, Nvidia, Broadcom, obviously TSM, I think they're going to be fine. Are you buying the dip? I did buy the dip, but it was like Monday, I think, like earlier in the week. Or I did a couple things this week. I don't remember. I bought TSM. I bought Amazon. I actually bought more Snowflake. You asked about Snowflake. I saw MongoDB's earnings actually. I have MongoDB on my watch list, and they actually, oh man, if you thought, oh, that's not it. If you thought Snowflake was bad today, you should see MongoDB. MongoDB down 27% today. Just absolutely crushed. I didn't dig into why or what happened with that, but am I worried about Snowflake? No, right? So, I mean, again, like market crash is a market crash, right? Like I didn't invest in Snowflake or any of these companies to be like, oh, it's going to go straight up in 2025. If it did, that's great. So again, when I talk about like Cloudflare, like the fact that it doubled in 6 months is like, okay, I should probably take profits because that just doesn't happen, right? With Snowflake, yeah, it was down 11% today as well, like 12%. It's just one of those things where I believe in the long-term trend. I believe in what they are providing as a company. So we'll see what happens over time. I'm not going to worry about a short-term trend right now. And part of that is, again, when I talked about risks and probabilities earlier, right? Snowflake is a riskier stock than, say, Amazon, right? So Amazon's a bigger part of my portfolio. Now, I've added more to Snowflake, so it's now a bigger part of it, my portfolio, because I believe in it. But I also know that by making it a bigger part of my portfolio, it means that I'm going to get some wild up and down swings that can be a little uncomfortable, right? So you just have to understand what you're getting yourself into. And we should never expect that our stocks go up in a straight line. It just does not work that way. So just as long as we're confident about the companies that we bought and our time horizon is long enough to kind of smooth out the ups and downs of the market or the like political news or whatever, then it should be okay, but we'll see. All right. Nikki, am I holding any cash during this dip? Well, I trimmed a couple holdings, which my channel members know what I trimmed, but, and I didn't really hold that cash. I had it for like a day. I think I added something that day, added something else a couple days later, and I have a little bit left. I'd probably have maybe 2-3% in cash right now, which isn't very much. And I'm just kind of waiting for, I don't know. I'm just waiting to see if the downtrend continues, and then I'll add to something else. I've kind of hesitated of adding new positions just because I know my existing positions, well. And so if they're coming down to a more attractive price where I can lower my cost basis per share, then I feel like that's an easier win than trying to find something new all the time. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. Okay, so can you share thoughts about overweight positions in companies you love and don't want to sell? So I'll just tell y'all what I trimmed, because I think that it kind of goes into what I've talked about before. So I think a month ago or so, when I was talking about Apple, I was talking about how, I love Apple as a company. I use, pretty much their products exclusively. Like my whole life is in Apple stuff, right? But I did say that if we got to a point to where the market presented some opportunities, that it may be a place that I would trim, because the reality is the valuation of Apple right now and the growth that you're getting, is not great, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. Let me go here real quick. And so, when you look at their growth right now, I mean, we all know what this is. We've all talked about this. And so Apple was an area where I actually decided to trim. And it was mainly because the opportunities out there were just good, right? And I'm like, look, if I can, swap out a portion of my Apple holding to get something that I think is really undervalued, that I also really like, then I'm going to go ahead and do that, right? And that's not for everyone. There's, people who will say that's too much trading and all that, and that's okay. But we all kind of have to do it like the same way. Now, I was going to start trying to do like a covered call over McDonald's because I felt that would be a good way to get a little bit of extra return for a company that's probably not going to beat the market, right? At least at this stage in terms of how their business is running. But as I started looking into it, like it just adds a lot of complexity into how I have to explain it. And, if other people try to do it, like you kind of have to get the timing right in order for it to really work well. Otherwise you get in a position where you may lose the position. And so I didn't want to do that to people because if I was worried about it, then I know other people are going to be worried about it. So I ended up actually trimming that a little bit as well. Because again, it was at a point where it had gone up a little bit. It actually is still going up today. But, when you look at the valuation compared to the growth, compared to what's happening with the business outlook, it kind of seemed like a good position to trim. So I've been doing a little bit of maintenance here in the first week or so of March because the downturn I get excited about it, right? I'm like, oh, okay, well, I bought Snowflake at 186 and now it's like 150 something. Well, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I liked it at 186. I clearly like it at 150 something. So maybe I should buy some, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. Obviously that's not going to be for everyone, but yeah, that's kind of how I've been handling overweight positions. Now in general, unless I feel like the growth outlook of the company is no longer good, or I feel like the valuation is just crazy, I don't always do that. Like when Nvidia was all the way up at 150 or whatever, I didn't trim any because I still felt like the outlook was good. So I don't do it for everything, but for ones where I'm like, you know what, it's, run up a bit, it doesn't really meet kind of the valuation or like the growth prospects, then like that's when I look at it. Hopefully that helps. Krishna, if Google's monopoly was not in question, do you think the valuation would be higher, priced in already? Yeah, so I think there's part of that. I think that they are priced in. And actually, let's look at this real quick together. I didn't realize we've already been on here for like an hour and a half almost. So I'm going to wrap up here in a minute. But so if we look at their valuation, well, let's look at cash flow first. So if we look at their cash flow valuation, I mean, clearly it's 13, which is low, right? But that's projected. So if we just look at trailing 12 months, it's like, it's not that far off from their 5-year average. So I think part of it is maybe it's priced in or it's undervalued. But I think the other part of it is their business, because it's ads, it tends to kind of ebb and flow a little bit. With the economy. So I think that also plays into it. I think that's also one of the reasons why Meta has a pretty low price to cash flow ratio as well. So I think it's a combination of maybe it's priced in, but also that it's the business that they're in, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Are you interested in ASML? I don't know what ASM is. I don't know if that's ASML or what. I've talked about ASML before. I think it's an interesting company. I have a bunch of stuff kind of in and around that space already that I understand better and that I'm more interested in. And so that's why I've concentrated on that. I actually think I answered an ASML question in the last live stream as well. But it's, one of those where I understand why people like it. It's just, I already have NVIDIA and Taiwan Semi and, other stuff. So that's why I didn't do it. I just realized you aren't drinking some bourbon or something. I'm going to have to get some to make up for that. Well, that's great for you. I actually do have a beer here that I just haven't touched the whole time because I talk too much. But, hold on. Joey, is Spotify on your watch list? What do you think of them? So Spotify is, I don't think they're actually on my watch list. I think they're an interesting company. And I think they'll be interesting if they continue to try to make this shift to be a YouTube competitor, because I mean they are. If that kind of continues to have legs, then I think they'll be really interesting. I think right now, I mean, Spotify, obviously the stock has done very well, right? But I'm just curious as to how well they can do with video, because at the end of the day, I don't know that, music and podcasts are enough. They are, pushing hard for video right now, and, having that be kind of a big thing on their platform. I think if they got, monetization for creators kind of locked down, I think they would be even better, right? So, I mean, part of the reason why YouTube is so popular is because people can get paid to make videos. And I think if Spotify can figure that out, then it'll help them. You mentioned you were into tech. What technologies do you work with? Well, so everything I do now is kind of like on my own, right? So in my corporate career, I started as a developer. I was like a Java programmer, but I kind of did a little everything after a while, because when you work in a corporate environment, you kind of get exposed to a bunch of different stuff. A lot of what I do now, I've actually started a little bit of programming again because of AI, actually, and just basic stuff. So doing stuff with like React Native and like Expo TypeScript. I mean, like basic stuff, and trying to connect it to like a back end, which is, again, this is like trivial for people who actually do it, but being that I, hadn't programmed in like a decade, and like I'm now getting back into it, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just kind of dabbling with that. But in terms of just like general tech, I'm just a tinkerer, right? So when new stuff comes out, I'm always using it. Whether that's all the ChatGPT stuff, whether that's the like latest Apple thing, whether that's like I like privacy tech a lot. So like I think I've told you guys I was into Bitcoin like a decade ago, and like actually in it where holding my own keys, running a node, all those type of things. So I just like tinkering. I like playing around. It actually interests me, and I think it helps me to get an idea of if I think something is actually interesting long term or not. So that's kind of what I meant by that. Probably not as technical as a few of you guys. Nikki, is there a specific number of holdings you have in your portfolio, or you keep adding new ones you like? So I try to keep it like I don't like adding new ones I like all the time. I think I have 11 right now. I would like to actually reduce that over time. I don't think like the longer I do this, the more I believe that we can do really, really well with just a smaller amount of companies that we really understand and know, than trying to add every new idea that we have. Like I think the challenge is that if you get up to, I don't know, 20, 25 holdings, like I feel like it's hard to really understand and know those companies in depth. And so when things happen in the market and it crashes, I think it's a lot harder to stay calm because you don't have the confidence of really understanding it as well. That's my opinion anyway. So I try to keep it, smaller. That being said, if there's a really great opportunity of a company that I like and it's available and I have money, then I'll add it. But I think, where I'm at, 11, 10 is probably where it's going to stay. If anything, it may get lower over time. Yes. Modelo Especial. It is good. I drink a lot of different beers though. I mean, actually, I don't really drink beer that much, but I'm not very picky. I'll drink whatever when it comes to beer. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Peter, Long-term viewer, not sure if you remember my comments. I remember the profile pic. So yes, I don't always remember names, but I do remember the profile pic. Have you ever looked into trucking companies? Now, I think you asked me this in a comment. I don't know if I responded or not. So I have not. And a lot of it is because I just don't know anything about it. And so, like I talked about before, like I've been keeping my number of holdings down. And part of it is I'm really trying to concentrate on things that I know well, because again, it helps with the confidence thing, right? So my challenge is if I go look at a trucking company and I try to learn about trucking, I may be able to learn a little bit, but I'm probably never going to really understand it like you would, right? Like a person who's actually involved in it. And so it would be hard for me to like know, like if I hear something in the news or the market's crazy, like is this a real thing or is this a thing that I shouldn't be worried about? So that's one of the reasons why I've kind of changed my approach. Like if you look at the stocks that I had in my portfolio a year and a half ago, they're very different than what I have now. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, you have all this tech now. It's because I understand it better, right? Like that's kind of more my wheelhouse than say, waste management to my own detriment. But that's kind of how I'm looking at it. That's why I haven't dug into it, but hopefully you're finding interesting opportunities and you can kind of use your own kind of, knowledge as an advantage. That's what I would say about that. Go Spurs. Yes, sir. Matt123. I like your name. Are you still bullish TSMC? Absolutely. 100%. John McQuaid. Hey, John, welcome. I think I saw your comment earlier. Sorry, I didn't get it. But yes, I agree. I think it just helps. The better you know what you're holding, then the less you care about what the market thinks about it or what everyone on X thinks about it or what anyone in the YouTube comments thinks about it. And I just feel like the more confidence we have in what we're doing just helps to kind of deal with the biggest challenge when it comes to all of this, and that's ourselves, right? Like the kind of the pressure of not knowing if what we're doing is a mistake or okay. To me, that's the biggest thing, and one way to control that is to really know what you hold, and so that's why I do it too. Do I like Cloudflare more than CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, or Zscaler at this point in time? So I will say I don't know those others as well as I know Cloudflare. So when I dug into Cloudflare, I maybe glanced at those a little bit, but I really was digging into Cloudflare specifically. So I can't really speak to how I feel about it compared to those other ones. But I will say that I do still like Cloudflare long term. Obviously, I'm still holding it. And honestly, like the thing about Cloudflare that I really was interested in was edge computing, right? And we haven't even scratched the surface of where that's potentially going to be. So I really think Cloudflare is going to be a long-term thing. And we'll just kind of see what happens. But in general, I think I mentioned this last live stream, anything in the cybersecurity space in general, I am bullish on, just because, again, it's a secular trend that's not going anywhere. I think everything in that space will go up. There's obviously going to be winners and losers, but I think in general, everything there's going to go up. Life tuition. Exactly. I'm a huge believer in that. And I've been, purposely trying to do that more in my portfolio over the last year. And that's why I made a lot of the changes I did. So 100% agree. Oh, man. So, Krishna, if you have to pick between Apple or Google, which one would you pick? If you're asking me if I have to pick between an iPhone and a Google phone, I'm picking an iPhone every day, all day. Although I actually have had Pixels in the past and they are really great phones. They're just not an iPhone. However, you're talking about the stock. So if you're asking me right now today, which one you should pick for returns, let's say over the next 5 years, I'd probably say Google. I think it's more attractively priced. I think their growth outlook, at least right now, is a little bit more clear than Apple's is. I was really disappointed in the news that Apple was delaying. Let me see if I can find it. That they're Yeah. So this, I think, yeah, it came out on Monday. I was really disappointed to hear that it could be delayed a couple years, that they were creating their own internal LLM and all that. I just, now I don't know if it's true or not. So, I mean, number one, it would have to be confirmed by Apple, right? And I don't know that it is. I really thought that their plan to kind of just incrementally add Apple Intelligence is good. I actually don't have a problem with that. But if this is true, that they are building an internal LLM and they're just slow on it and it's going to be a couple years until it comes out, then I think that's pretty disappointing, because at the end of the day, I think we all knew this was coming. So my original idea, or my original opinion for them, was if they're just going to use all their internal stuff to be able to build a personalized AI helper for you that has all your data, all your health data, all your calendar data, then that makes perfect sense for Apple, because they can put that on device so it's more private. It's like, extremely low latency. Like, all those things are great ideas for them. But if they're just going to build another LLM and they're just slow on it, then I'll be extremely disappointed in that. So anyway, more to come on that in terms of if that's what's happening, but that's kind of what it sounded like. So yeah, if you ask me today, I would probably say pick Google, even though if you look at my portfolio, it has more Apple than Google in it. So you just have to take that for what it is. All right. Whew. Man, I think we're done. It's been a little over an hour and a half. I just want to say that I appreciate you guys hanging out on the stream. I hope you got something out of it. It was a lot of fun for me. It always is. I'm getting more used to kind of doing this. So my plan is to maybe do it every other week or so. Obviously, if you can't make it, that's totally fine. I'm going to post clip videos after the live streams as well, so that the people who don't want to watch an hour and a half, don't have to. But it'll just highlight certain parts of it and not have everything in it. But yeah, appreciate you guys being here. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.